Welcome to the Living Consciously TV show, coming to you live from our Denver, Colorado studios. I'm your host and moderator, Coach Steve Toth, and our theme today is Co-Creating with the Divine. And today is one of our pillar shows, and we have one of these every month, and it's usually one of the 7 areas of life balance that we use as the foundation of our show. So today, it's going to be about spirituality, and we're going to go a little bit deeper than usually on our shows. And our lead cast today, let me introduce you to our cast. Our lead cast today is Jane Eileen Cohn. Welcome to the show, Jane.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here.
Awesome. And next to the left to Jane is Jamie Lerner. She's our self-growth and relationship cast member, and she's from the beautiful city of Chicago. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you.
And then we also have Alicia Kramer, and Alicia is also our self-growth cast member, and she's right now coming to us from Wisconsin. Welcome to the show,
Thank
Alicia.
you.
And last but not least, James McPartland. He is our health and self-growth cast member, and he is coming to us right now from Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, James.
Steve, always a pleasure to be with you and the team.
Awesome, fantastic. All right, so here's how the show is going to go today. So in our first segment, we will just briefly talk about what really the Living Consciously TV show is all about, and we do this for the benefit of our first-time viewers. And then in the second segment, we will explore with a dialogue between the cast and myself what are the issues and problems generally with people not connecting to the divine. And then in the third segment, we will have a dialogue again between us about what are the solutions and maybe some of the modalities that all of us have used, either for ourselves or for our clients, that assisted them to connect them to the divine. And we're doing something different again today. We're going to open up the lines to all of you, to all of our viewers, to call in anytime you like. And you can see the number on the screen. So just call us at 720-222-0158 and ask any questions that you like from any of us. With that, let's begin with just give a little introduction. I'd like to give a little introduction. What is the Living Consciously TV show is all about? Well, what it is for me is it's about really showing the public what consciousness looks like and feels like. And today, I'm going to use an example that may drive it home a little bit easier for all of our viewers. So all of you probably do remember sometimes in your lifetime, in your business life, when you went to a meeting, either in a conference room or in a more larger public place, where somebody was speaking and talking about usually the company, the future of the company, maybe financials, goals, all kinds of things like that. And they were asking you to give some feedback. And usually what ends up happening is everybody's quiet. Nobody's sharing themselves. Nobody's sharing their truth. However, as soon as you leave the conference room, all of a sudden people will start talking and really saying what they wanted to say in the meeting. Okay, so what our show is about is really we are putting ourselves on the line, the cast and myself, to, in the moment of truth, when we are speaking about something or having a dialogue, really say what we are feeling to each other. So that's what came to me today to share with you. So anybody has anything else to add?
Steve, sorry I was rude to you in those meetings.
It's quite all right.
No, I think that was well said.
It didn't activate me. Okay.
If you were only by the water cooler after that meeting, you would have heard everything on my mind.
All right, great. So with that, let's just jump right into our second segment. So the leading question that I have is for Jane. Is most of us live in our separated ego personality self. Why is that, Jane?
It's just habits, what people know. It's There's a lot of different reasons for that. It's people do that when they don't want to come into the present moment. And it's usually an unconscious, there's an unconscious reason for it. People don't have the consciousness to get underneath that unconscious process. And the reason people avoid the present moment is because of the pain of early childhood decisions that they made on an unconscious level about there's something inherently wrong with them or that life doesn't work in some way. So, and most people make a number of limiting decisions of that sort, and that's what the process of self-growth is about. The process of spiritual development is about, is having the courage to really look deeply at those issues and move through them. And so that takes it takes focus and intention. And so if you're just living your life along, just plodding along, and things are going well enough, many people don't bother. But when life shakes you up a bit, or you're feeling empty enough from not going deeply into yourself, then you might be more prone to look at things on a deeper level to get to connect with yourself more. I don't know if I've addressed what you're actually asking me.
Okay, great. So we should probably, for the benefit of our viewers, maybe explain a little bit what is the divine, what do we mean by divine, and maybe even explore a little bit about self in terms of our ego, and maybe our spirit, and then our divine self, and what's the difference between these three. Could we do that?
Sure.
All right. So who would like to share about any of those, our ego, our spirit, and our divine self?
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the word divine means different things to different people.
Yeah.
A lot of people have different labels for what that is. To me, it's a very all-encompassing word that, oftentimes is referred to as God, universe, universal consciousness. There's so many different names that you can put on it, but essentially it's all that is, and it's all that we are. And a lot of people would consider that the all-knowing kind of intelligence. For some people it represents love, and I think that for the sake of our viewers, it's beneficial to connect with what that higher power, quote unquote, is to you.
Okay, so
I could add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
To me, the divine is what transcends the physical experience. It's the essence of everything that exists. And similar to what Alicia said, it is the essence of love, the essence of intelligence and consciousness and principle and life, spirit. So it's the essence of the underpinnings of what makes real experience when you get to the bottom of any experience. When you get to the here and now in relation to anything that occurs, that's where you find the divine essence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we're not connected to that, then what are we connected to?
Well, I think we're still connected. You can never completely connect, or disconnect, I should say, with life. Otherwise, there would be no life. But there's the law of polarity, and that law says that you cannot have light without dark. So it's just a different area on the spectrum of life. It's maybe a little bit more detached from the love aspect of life or the joy element of our existence. So it's not being completely disconnected. It's just being maybe a little bit further from our truth. That's my interpretation.
And
Okay.
I think that the ego is the gatekeeper between our connection with ourselves. And that when our ego kicks in, that our connection with ourselves is blocked in a sense, because we're not feeling safe enough to allow ourselves to be in that moment in connection with our inner knowing and our inner truth and our inner guidance. So I think when we are in that divine connection, then it's a time where consciously or unconsciously we've asked our ego to step down and step aside.
Great.
You know, Steve, I'd like to give you my version of Divine for Dummies, because that's what I can relate to. You talked about the business environment. I think what happens is little people were inspired to do great things in our life. As we get a little bit older and as we go through the school systems and around large people, we're taught to color between the lines, be seen but not be heard. And a lot of our passion, enthusiasm, and perhaps purpose is nullified by meeting expectations of other people. So I think there's an incongruence in terms of what's in our head and what's in our heart. In that corporate environment you described, it's a carrot and stick principle. The reason people aren't speaking up in that meeting is fear. And the only divine entity in those rooms is the boss. And the divine or spirituality is sort of something that is not necessarily eagerly allowed into the corporate arena. So the way I address it, I do a lot of work in this space in the corporate market, is it's aligning the head and the heart and its purpose. And it's listening to the voice inside and trying to find a way to listen to that voice and to your truth, because ultimately that's part of why you were put on earth, to perpetuate that truth.
Okay, so I'm trying to read between the lines in terms of what you're saying. I'm listening to you. So are you saying that there's a lot of pretending that goes on in the corporate world, and what does that cost in terms of productivity? I mean, don't people realize that there's a huge cost for not being present and pretending and playing games?
Well, you know, you could expand upon that, because I think it's multifaceted. On the average corporate, let's just use average, and average, let's say, is a company of $50 million or greater. We can use the U.S. or you can use outside the U.S. 20 to 25% of a work week is spent in redoing something, an initiative that was started because people don't understand. The communication is lapsed, or somebody sends an email or communicates a message that they think gets across, people misunderstand, and there's a lot of fear of second-guessing the boss. And so expectations are the boss, and the boss is right. And in most environments, that's what people have to bow down to, particularly when an economy is difficult. You don't want to do anything to upset the boss because that paycheck's all important. So maybe it's not so much what's said as what's not said out of fear.
Well, so could I interject something in here, a particular perspective that I have about what we're talking about, which is, so Jamie described it as the ego, and James is describing it in another way as well. But the way I'm looking at it is there is the real world and there's the substitute world. And the way I would describe it, the ego is a substitute self that is developed every time a person makes a limiting decision. It's a decision against themselves and the nature of life. And so what people do is develop an alternative system to the real world. And certainly the business world often is like a mini world, a mini substitute world with goals that really have nothing to do, to some degree, to varying degrees, with real personal satisfaction, real personal benefit. And so people are looking in the wrong direction for making progress.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm also noticing that on commercial television, what we have pretty much is drama almost 100% of the time. Now, and I think a lot of people believe that what's going on television is real, and it isn't real. But then, interestingly, we recreate that in our reality.
Well, what do you mean? I'm a little lost there. What you said. They think what is real?
Television. What they see on television, all the drama that they see on television.
Are you talking about news or actual shows?
I'm talking about shows and films and movies and programs. Most of it is all kinds of people are. Just look at any of the reality shows that are so popular. It's all based on creating drama and creating friction, creating disagreements. Showing the public, how to argue, how to have fights, and then we end up going out to the world ourselves, repeat the same thing.
Oh, come on, Steve, that's not true.
That's not true?
No.
Really?
Well, for one thing, I don't watch reality TV shows, so I might
Well,
be,
then you're not qualified to comment.
But you often show drama on dramas, and often what they are is that they show a conflict, something not working, and then people working through it to an end, and it usually ends positively. And I don't think that people learn how to get in fights with each other because of television. Television is reflecting what people do.
I think
Okay.
I think it's the other way around.
Well, it's an interesting conversation about television mimicking life or life mimicking television.
Yes, it is.
But I think sometimes it's a way that we can put distance between ourselves. That's for sure. So sometimes television becomes a wonderful distraction for us to be very disconnected from ourselves. And,
what better way to tune out than to be completely immersed in absolute insanity?
Yeah, so the average American, right?
What shows are you guys watching?
The average
You
American.
have lots of wonderful options.
Okay, well, we're probably not the average American, but the average American watches 6 hours of television a day. So are you telling me, Jane, that when people are engaged on television for 6 hours every day, they are not learning something from what they're watching?
What they're learning is what their filter system is bringing into themselves. Mm-hmm. So when I watch television, I'm watching for a particular vibration or a particular feeling or something that enhances my life. And I learn a lot. So it just depends upon what you're looking for or what you're in alignment with.
And I think that's true, that you can watch television passively or you can watch television actively. You can consciously choose to be engaged in television, or you can use television as a wonderful distraction to take a break from connecting with yourself. So,
it's also an important point, I think, that both Jane and Jamie touched on is that, like, I'll use myself as an example. I'm not going to watch the Hills or whatever that type of show is called, because that doesn't resonate with me. The frequencies don't match up. So somebody who's actively watching those types of programs, that is a frequency or some conditioning that's within them that is kind of aligning, so to speak, with that programming. And then in that sense, what it's doing is it's reinforcing some of that negative conditioning that they already have. So, my son is 2.5 years old, and he's at this stage in his life where if somebody says something, he'll repeat it. Or if he sees something on TV, he may act it out. And I think adults oftentimes do the same thing at a more unconscious level when it resonates with them.
Okay, so let's use a real example, because I think this is a really interesting conversation. So I'm not going to name the show because I don't want to provide any commercials for them. But so here's the show what the show is about is it's either a man or a woman, and then what ends up happening at the beginning of the show, they bring in 25 to 30 men or women, and then they go through a whole selection process by giving the one person that's looking for this relationship, and they're actually looking for getting married at the end of the show, they go through a process of elimination through all the shows that they go through. They go through probably, 12, 15 shows, like a season, and by the end, this woman or man is supposed to find their mate.
True love.
And so please tell me, what does that has to do with reality? When do we ever, in reality, go out with 25, 30 women?
It has to do with fantasy. And a lot of relationships have to do with fantasy when people don't have the belief they can have the real thing.
And the drama that occurs, I mean, if you just tune into one of these shows and notice the drama that goes on, and these people get zero coaching in terms of how to handle any. The only reason I check it out is because I see completely what's missing. It's like they need to have somebody in there coaching these people so that the viewers can actually learn something.
Steve, I'd like to jump in because I do think it is all conditioning, and I think that it's social proof. And if you said people are spending 6 hours a day in front of television, now this might just be your personal viewing habits by virtue of what you're sharing with us, but
It's not, James. These are real statistics.
because you know more about TV than I was aware of.
No. If you think I have 6 hours to watch a day television, you don't know me.
Or you could draw those conclusions. So, but let me play this out for you, because if you're going to come back to co-creating with the divine, sort of the theme of the show, I think that part of the purpose of this particular program is to align people's passion and purpose and truth to move forward in life. And I think when people get on path, maybe in line with the divine, and do things that they've been gifted to do, there's a lot less time to watch television, right? And that, I think, that can often be a sign of boredom or less than being satisfied with oneself. You can open up, and what's the number one selling magazine? If it's either People and then the Inquirer, or the Inquirer then People. And when people live vicariously through others, and they like to see train wrecks, and then they like to feel better about themselves by belittling others or live in a fantasy land. And I think it has a lot to do with being less than satisfied with themselves or recognizing what they have inside of them. I think what you can do by virtue of this program, and what you are doing, is helping people find their truth and get on path, and maybe spend less time in front of that television, because you're not going to fight television. It's big business.
Yes, and the reason we're having the conversation and the dialogue the way we're having it is because less than 1% of the population are connected to themselves and to their passion. And 99% of the population out there are not connected. They're disconnected. So I believe when you're disconnected, you basically don't have any other choice than to do all kinds of things in your life, i.e. watch television for 6 hours, because if you're not connected to your passion and you're not connected to who you really are, please tell me what other options do you...
Okay, so let me interject here.
Please do.
The frame of reference from which you're speaking is that you are the only one in your universe, that you can just blithely get along with being in what I call the substitute world, dissociated from everything that's real, and you can just go on in your life forever that way, and nothing's going to stop you. But that's not what happens, because there's a larger reality that is happening with or without your consent, and probably with your consent on a soul level or a higher self kind of level. This is a show about spirituality, so I can talk about stuff like that.
You can.
Yeah.
So there is a larger truth, a larger umbrella. That's when we were talking about the divine. There is an intelligence that is, you could say, overseeing everything. And there is an evolutionary process, which is of particular interest to me. And many people, including myself, have the experience that the evolutionary process is accelerating right now, that things are moving at a very rapid rate, and people are feeling perhaps more discombobulated. I can't think of a more clinical term than that. People are feeling unstable. They're feeling as though things are shifting and they don't know what's happening, or things are, their finances are unstable, relationships, marriage isn't what it used to be, religion is having less meaning to people. There's a lot of things that people used to lean on for their stability, and it's all shifting and changing. The whole world is changing with all the stuff in the air in the Mideast. And so life around us has its own timing for things and is affecting all of us. And the reason that I thought of this idea of co-creating with the divine is I think what we need to address is why co-creating with the divine is so important, especially right now, because it's starting to be a very, very relevant issue.
So are you saying then, Jane, that we're not in control of when this happens? Are you saying that this is somehow we all have our own destiny and it happens whenever it's supposed to happen, based on...
It's a relationship. We are in a co-creative. We're in relationship with life, with the divine, with each other, with all of it. Mm. And so wherever you are on your particular path, and whatever really matters to you is in relationship with larger truths as well as each other.
Well, so I think the message that is important is that for people to understand that they can tap into this at any given time. So it is available to them. Clearly, it is not going to happen without their consent, but it is an option that allows them to connect with themselves and to something bigger than themselves. So that's really what you're talking about. And
It
this
is.
show gives them permission and maybe in an awareness to identify for them particularly in what way they could do that.
And that's what I'm hoping that the show will address in the positive part or the solution part or the last part.
Yeah, well, it's naturally, since you're making that request, we're there.
Okay. All right. So.
And it seems to be somewhat uncomfortable for you to show, the public the negative side, and we all know that the positive does not exist without the negative.
It's not. I don't really see it as negative. I see it as describing a particular perception of the way things are. It's not really negative because the truth isn't negative, but it is describing. When I work with a client, first I make really clear and conscious exactly how that person is perceiving things, how they form the problem in their mind. Now, I don't believe that the problem really exists the way they've got it formed in their mind, but I find it helpful to make really, really clear how a person is thinking about things, how they have created the problem they perceive in their life. So I see the first part of this as doing that. And if I seem uncomfortable, it's because perhaps I perceive you as really believing that it is negative. That I don't agree with.
Yeah, well, I'm sharing these things on the show, and I'm being sometimes controversial because I'm taking the place sometimes of the viewer. And if the viewers would like to call in and give us their own point of view, we would love it. So just call 720-222-0158. But my truth is that when I think about people wasting their time for 6 hours watching television when they could be connected to who they really are and their passion and create something absolutely awesome, the possibilities of creating our lives is unlimited. It's almost like connecting to your divine self, for me, is like winning the lottery of life.
And Steve, why don't we, and I don't know if this is the right time, but I don't know that anybody would agree necessarily or disagree until you give some people some tools or give them some picks and shovels to put in their hands, because it's almost like giving me a basketball and screaming at me to dunk. I can't dunk no matter what happens, but I want to score. Teach me another shot. So how do people, and maybe this comes back to Jane, I think when we're talking about ego and about divine and being conditioned by outside forces, television, mass media, thousands of impressions a day, we create these stories in our head about what the truth is, and that's purely a story. On this program, you've had the courage many times to talk about your own health campaign. And it's my belief that you have a disempowering story that gets in the way of you living a healthier life or having healthier outcomes, and that's not a criticism. It's the same as people watching television or getting caught up in disempowering associations. I think there's ways that we could help folks get aligned, and one of the hardest things to do is to get quiet and to listen to the voice inside, because instinctively, all the ingredients are in the package. We know if we trust ourselves to listen to the instinct or the divine inside to make some life decisions, if we have the courage to trust ourselves and not other people to direct us.
Yes, I think that's true. And that inner directedness is, I think, key to connecting with the so-called divine. So that's, an excellent message for people.
Yes, I agree. And we're I believe that we're all connected. I didn't mean to, maybe at the beginning of the show, maybe you misunderstood. So I'd like to correct that. I didn't mean that there are people out there that are not connected to the divine. All of us are. So I agree with all of you that we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't exist if we were not. So we're all connected. It's just, the question really is do we really hear what, and are we open to what our divine self is trying to tell us? Because it's always trying to tell us what to do. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I'd like to sort of maybe we should address that as I think there's two ways of addressing that, and probably the way you formed it, James, would have more of a direct answer to what you're saying. But since I'm talking, I'll say my perspective.
Is there anybody else's perspective that you would like to do instead?
I hope not.
I hope not either.
So as I said, what interests me right now is there's a larger evolutionary process happening. The world is getting shook up. And so I think that it is time for a shift in how we're perceiving the different things, ways people have been structuring their lives, different ways people have been approaching business or relationship or their spiritual life or whatever it is. Those things that sustain us, you could say, those structures that sustain us. And I think what it really takes is opening up a space, opening up a place where we don't already fill in what we think we know, which I would call standing in the question, is getting yourself in a place where you say, I don't know what this means, and therefore I don't know how to respond, and then waiting. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted James to be on the show is because I feel as though that is his approach to his business, his work. So he goes into a company and he puts out the idea that there's potential in the workers. There's potential visions that could alter the vision of the whole business.
Jane, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hold your thought for a second? We have a caller. Yeah. Let's see what our viewers have to say about all of this. Welcome to the show. Please tell us your first name and where you're calling from.
Brian Nemeth, Denver, Colorado.
Thank you for calling. And what is your question for the cast?
I'm a journalism student in college, and I've watched too much political bias and negativity in the news. And seeing that this is an election year, we're always getting hit with a choice, having to choose between a giant douchebag Democratic candidate and a turd sandwich Republican candidate. We get hit with that every year.
Okay.
Worse, the media tells us
I didn't hear all of that except for some choice words.
Why the candidate's better than the other. And my idea of how I would cover politics and cover the elections is take a look at one issue.
Okay.
Look at the liberal.
Yeah, I think we got the question. Let our cast respond to your question.
I think he was rejected on The Bachelor.
What was the question, Steve?
I think recollecting what he said, I think he was talking about the political environment right now. That he admitted that he watches too much television, especially about the political environment right now, and that he was not happy with who the candidates are. So I don't know how we can help him with that, but let's see.
Well, maybe if he could figure out a way to connect with his self, with his inner knowing, then he would be able to navigate the issues that the candidates are speaking about. Because I think that there's a lot of confusion for people about what's going on in the politics right now, and they really don't know who to trust and what to think and who to vote for. And what a wonderful way to feel more comfortable with whoever you're choosing is to get tuned into yourself, connect with yourself, and to figure out based on your own inner knowing what and who resonates with you.
Yeah. So while I was listening to that, thank you, Jamie. I'll share my truth about it. So my truth about it is that I don't feel that the system works, our political system works. So therefore, I made the conscious choice that I'm not going to support either party because it doesn't work for me. Period.
Okay, so I have a response, which is, in any situation a person's in, all they can do is the best they can. But that doesn't really determine the outcome. What's the important thing is that you play your piece in the puzzle of what's going on in the world. But you're not dependent on what's happening in the world. which is, Steve, when you were saying that how you really want people to tap into their real selves and get conscious, and how it's frustrating to you that people watch so much TV. I think
Yeah,
that's.
I didn't mean to say that it's frustrating to me.
Oh,
I just
all right.
I just stated a fact.
Okay, so the point here is this gentleman that was just talking. I would suggest you do the best you can in terms of choosing the candidate that makes the most sense to you, but that your well-being and the world's well-being, there's a larger process that's going on, and that the whole frame of reference of the political system, you could say, is a piece in the puzzle, but it's not the whole thing. A lot of stuff is happening at this time that is beyond the structures that we think control the world.
Okay, so let's just so let's just take another simple fact. Okay, negative ads in the political system has been around. They have been around for quite a while, and when the negative ads started is when I connected to my conscious view that, guess what, if for these people is more important to tear each other down than to build each other up, I'm no longer interested. Thank you very much.
Well, that was a clear choice that you made for yourself,
Yeah.
and that's also important to let people know that they can choose. However, for the people that do want to try to navigate this political circus that the media has to offer us, I think that that they can only tune into themselves and figure out what makes the most sense for them individually. Because I think people want to feel empowered by making some kind of a choice. Now, whether that's going to impact on the larger, bigger picture, Jane, I mean, I'm not really sure, but.
Well, I don't know that it's not that it would impact the larger picture. From the perspective that I'm coming from, really, the only relationship you have is yourself and the universe. And so you do the best you can in any circumstance. You put everything that you can do, or every step that you can take, or every effort that you can make that is congruent for you to do and take, you do. And that's being a part of a larger process, divine plan, or however you want to put it. You are then participating in your life, in the universe, in the best way you can. And you can't really control all the different ins and outs of permutations of, I do this, that's going to happen, that's going to happen. People try to live their lives by trying to control all the different possible outcomes. But there is a larger thing at play. So all you can do is follow your inner guidance, follow your heart, follow what feels right to you, follow your intelligence, your love, all the basic things, and do what's in front of you to do, and then let go of it.
I agree. I also would like to say that, from an energetic perspective, we are giving energy to our own experience, our own perception of these things that we might call problems or challenges, or consider injustices in the world. So the more negativity that you're projecting into that, the more that is creating in your life and in the universe. Because we call this episode Co-Creating with the Divine. We're also co-creating with each other. And I do believe that things are changing, as Jane has stated several times, and that there is a bigger picture that we don't see yet. And we can either project more negativity into what we perceive to be these horrible things that are taking place in, our world and in our government, or we can begin to raise our own consciousness, raise our own vibration, be the more authentic version of ourselves, co-create with other people who are doing the same thing. And there will be a tipping point where energetically this shift is going to take place, but there's a gestation period to that. It's not going to happen instantaneously. So when we focus on all of the negative, we're blocking the ability to reach that tipping point where we can co-create a better world, a better system, a better government, whatever it might be. the longer we focus on the negative and project more and more and more of our energy as, this is a negative thing, this is a problem, instead of focusing on being, more congruent within ourselves, we're only perpetuating the problem. We're actively co-creating exactly what we say is wrong or the problem.
Exactly. And it's a process of defining reality. And that's what we're doing. We're defining reality. We're either leaning on someone else to define it, like the politicians, as if they can define what reality is, or the church, or the parents, or the schools, or the teachers, or the police, or whoever it is that seems to have the power to define things. Or we can come from a deeper source, a deeper place inside of ourselves, the highest part of ourselves. It's an issue of who are you letting define reality for you.
Jane, can I jump in with a recommendation?
Yeah.
So, a lot of things we're talking about, the gentleman who called in about being upset about the political options, we give labels and meanings to things, and we interpret things, and they trigger us for whatever reason that we've created those labels and meanings, and we possess that, we own that. Reality is subjective, which reality to me is different from somebody else. And when I come back to, and I'll think of that corporate environment, as you were alluding to, I spent a lot of time in that space. Steve opened up for that sort of environment. So, if I was to say something to somebody who's listening, my suggestion and recommendation is test drive personal responsibility. And the test drive is take 100% responsibility for your outcomes.
Absolutely.
So that's a pretty hard thing for most people to get their arms around, but once somebody takes 100% of their 110% or 100% responsibility, one has to think about how you engage people, and we train people on how to deal with us. We can retrain people on how to deal with us. If something's upsetting us, why is it upsetting us? Take the responsibility for it. And if one takes 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, test driving 100% responsibility for the outcomes, there's a high probability it'll change interpretation and meanings we give to other things, because when you give away your power, you become powerless.
Exactly. And then you blame the boss or the coworker or whatever, rather than getting in there, looking at your situation, defining it from your own direct experience, and then contributing your piece in the puzzle.
And blaming the politician.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's giving the politician all this power. If you sit there blaming them.
Right. So what we haven't really talked about yet is, would you say that one of the tools for helping our viewers to be connected to the divine would be the concept of opting out of things that is not aligned with who you really are?
Absolutely. Yes.
I wouldn't even look at it opting out. It would be opting toward. It's not, the focus isn't against, or this is so terrible, I'm leaving. The focus is what does inspire you. I mean, co-creating with the divine is going towards inspiration. It's going
But you
towards.
need to shift your
let's
attention.
Let's just call it what it is, okay?
Because you do need to shift your attention from something that isn't resonating with you in order to find something that is. So it's that contrast again. And so to know something's not resonating with you, having a choice to say this is not for me, and then putting your focus on something that is more in keeping with what you're in alignment with.
Okay, so let me just put it a different way. Okay, so for example, religion for me, it doesn't work the way it is right now in the world. So therefore, I opted out, and I don't go. You're not going to find me in church. 10 years ago, you found me in church. Today, you won't find me because I opted out. I go to my own church.
Well, right, and there are so many other versions of church today. So, I mean, for you, traditional church is no longer an option, although another kind of church might be. And it could just be going up to the mountains for you. That could be your church. So, I think that once we determine that something isn't working for us, it's wonderful if we can take the next step and move towards something that is working for us.
And it's a process. That's an important point to make, is that oftentimes when we recognize that something isn't right for us, it doesn't feel good, it's not working, we don't immediately shift to the polar opposite and find our bliss. It's taking the first step. So you use the term opting out. Maybe that's the first step, but that is then pointing you in a different direction and getting you closer and helping you to clarify what is right and good for you. And because we are always changing, you know, we will continue to change and continue to grow and to continue to evolve. So what is right and good for us is going to change as we progress through life. So we always have to be open to recognizing that the shifts that we're making in our life may be good for me today, and tomorrow that may not feel right, and then I have to continue on this journey. And that is a part of co-creating, is being aware of where you're at, how it feels, and being willing to move and to flow and to evolve and to always be more of your authentic self as you grow and change and evolve.
Right on. So let's mention some more tools that we may have that can assist our viewers to get connected to the divine and to their divine self.
Well, I like to ask clients to construct a mantra that works for them, because I think that when you start telling yourself where you want to be and how you want to feel, then you can actually move towards that. And oftentimes when we quiet our minds, we find that we are telling ourselves what we don't want and where we don't want to be, as opposed to how we would like to feel and where we would like to be. So that kind of opens the door for people to move in the direction that does feel better for them. So developing more specific mantras for them.
Awesome.
For me, there's a number of different tools, but one tool is in the process of a transformational group process. I facilitate groups and workshops, and the working with the raw material is what I would call it. Jamie might call it the drama. It's when things come up between people that seem to be in conflict. Out in the world, they might get into fights, and sometimes I have couples in it, and stuff comes up that they would get into. If it was just by themselves, they would get into a fight that just goes nowhere. But if that conflict is opened up and I can't think of the word, but looked at what's underneath it deeper, explored, then you find what's confusing things, what's describing it incorrectly. At the bottom of it, you end up finding love. That's what I find in the group process, that when you get underneath the conflict and what's at the source of that, you open up to something that you didn't know was there before.
I disagree.
Well, let me just...
Sorry.
Okay, but let me just let me completely say my thought, and then,
okay, I'm sorry.
Then I'll listen to your thought.
Okay.
And I experience this over and over again, is misunderstandings. I thought you meant this, but then the person says, no, I meant this. And then I said this because I felt that you were criticizing me here. And then when we go deeper and deeper, we find that both people really admire and love each other, and that's the real truth underneath the apparent conflict. And that's what I find over and over again in a group process, where there appears to be conflict. When you get to the bottom of it and you sort out the misunderstandings, then you find what people didn't realize was there before, which is connection and love. And so co-creating with the divine is opening up, is going into the unknown, where you find what is really there, which always turns out to be positive.
Okay, and I think it's more a matter of taking personal responsibility, as James said earlier, and moving in a forward direction. I don't think you need to go back in order to go forward. I don't think you need to get to the bottom of anything necessarily. I do think that we need to take personal responsibility for what we're saying and how we're feeling, and I think we should be less concerned about what another is saying and what another is feeling and trying to convey.
But taking personal responsibility is admitting how you're reacting to another person.
Taking personal responsibility, I think, is connecting with yourself and understanding that whatever it is that you are feeling is your own.
That's true, and both can come together. That's the whole point of that kind of a group interaction, is taking responsibility for yourself in the context of relating, where you get underneath the illusion that's occurring.
Okay.
So could I give a different twist to it, Steve, because you asked about tools. So one of the things I'll describe here, I think, is simple, and it doesn't mean it's easy. And this is, you say co-creating with the divine. To me, the divine is when you're feeling blissful, when you feel like you're on your path, you're on purpose, you're doing what you were constructed to do or what you were gifted to do when you were sent down to the earth in the mothership. You know, if there are 2 or 3 things that you have, that you do in your life, or that you think you're really gifted at or you're unique at, whether that's cooking or speaking or running or designing or manufacturing, there are certain things that we all do that we find enormous satisfaction and fulfillment from. The question I'd have for people is, how much time do you spend getting to do those things? And if it's not enough, how do you ratchet up and increase the volume of time doing those things? Obviously, providing it's meeting your responsibilities and your obligations. But, you know, we're all gifted to do specific things. And the hard thing to do is to be authentically ourselves and use what we're gifted at, no matter what other people think. And then I believe that co-creating with the divine is using what you've been gifted at, opening up those gifts, using them to give them away to other people, and then teaching people to do the same. To me, that's how you find the benefit of co-creation in opening the gifts that you've been given at birth.
I love that, and I want to, if I can just, because what I have to say, just it's kind of like putting the little star on top of the tree to what you just said, and it's really just like you said, it's so simple, and yet it's so hard for most people, is to just have more fun. Just when this has been a real challenge for me, so I get it. I get that it's not easy and that it's a real process, but our natural state of being is, you know, when we are co-creating, it feels good. It feels right. We're in the flow. And when we allow ourselves to just do things that make us feel good. So if you're in a funk, go out and go for a walk, play, sing, dance, do something. Just get yourself into that higher vibrational state. At first, it might feel really weird and kind of awkward, but you're retraining yourself to be in that natural, divine, co-creative state.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. And actually, it's I think we're in the times right now in 2012 where nobody should be really struggling. You know, if we give this opportunity to ourselves to create our divine self and live our lives from our divine self versus from our ego, all of this struggling, I think, would all go away, I feel. And the tool that I would like to recommend is meditation and being in silence, because that's really where the possibility of connecting to the divine opens up. We're all the same.
Well, we are the same and different.
Right, exactly.
That's
a paradox, but right, Jane, I think we're probably thinking the same thing. The substance that we are all made of is the same. There's
Divine.
truth in the statement that we are all one, but to say that we are all the same, that we all have the same thoughts and feelings and likes and dislikes and natural preferences and tendencies is a fallacy, because certainly we are all quite unique and different, and that's what makes this whole experience what it is the diversity. It's God, it would be boring if we all were the same.
Each person has a piece in the puzzle. We each have our own particular perspective from the place that we're standing in. We have different experiences and different richness to add to the whole experience of what is truth.
Okay, well, I gotta cut you guys off because we're running out of time. So this has been incredible. I know that we could keep going on, and we will. We'll keep going on next week. But for right now, we're out of time, and I just want to thank all of our viewers and, of course, all of our cast members and the crew. And remember to vote on our shows and also to come to our website at livingconsciousness.tv and engage with us, join our membership site, and come cruise with us in Alaska coming up in August. Thank you all. I love you all. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.